How do you create something that's different than everyone else? You do it differently than everyone else. Here at Copeland Creative, we specialize in telling captivating stories of wild people, wild things, and wild places. We don't just capture the story, we immerse ourselves in it. We are a diverse, multi-talented media house based in North Georgia, and if you have a story that needs told, we want to help you tell it.
And we are live on the Redneck Tech Podcast YouTube. We're about 13 minutes late. You can blame that on me.
Per usual, that's about his normal time.
Yes, but today it was because I had to set up all of everything from scratch on my laptop. We usually do this on Caleb's laptop, and his has everything set up, so we just plug it in and it goes. But I had to reset everything up on mine. So it took a little longer than I guess I thought it was. But we're here now, and that's what counts. Do we want to go live on the Redneck Tech Instagram for like two minutes?
I already posted about it.
I know, but if we go live, then it actually notifies people, I think. I don't know. I feel like if we go live, people will hop on. Maybe. Currently, we have 0 concurrent viewers on the YouTube. Because we're just that popular. What, do you hear that? Are you hearing a little bit of feedback going on? Or is that just me?
It might just be your voice.
No. It's not that one. So are we going to go live? I think we should go live on the Redneck Tech Instagram for like 2 minutes. Let people know what we're doing, what we're talking about, and then, we'll jump into it. You're now live. What's up, Redneck Tech Instagram? You know who I am. You know who he is. And you also know who he is. You know who everybody is. So if you thought that I was going to surprise you with somebody that you didn't know, you would be wrong. But basically, we're going to be on this live for like 2 minutes because we are streaming on YouTube right now. We're doing a live podcast, as we do on Wednesdays. And today we're having a very meta discussion about what it takes to have a podcast. I know there's some guys out there that want to have a podcast, have thought about having a podcast, and maybe are wondering what it takes to have a podcast. And we're going to talk about some of the gear that you'll need, some of the services you may need to subscribe to on the interwebs in order to publish your podcast, and then kind of what some of the back-end work looks like so that, you can hopefully at the end of this get a good idea of what is involved in having a podcast besides just the talking about things. Because
it's live inception.
Is it? We're live-ceptioning? There's so many cameras.
Platforms.
Which platform is that? Should we introduce the TikTok to the Instagram? Hey guys, look at that.
No, it's forever. No, it's real inception.
You guys could talk to each other if you really wanted to. It's like, you ever seen those prank calls where you have 2 takeout places and you take 2 phones and each person calls a takeout place and then you let them talk to each other?
Yes.
That's kind of like what this is.
That's been a thing since
1982. I know it has.
Invented.
I know it has, but maybe some people haven't heard of that gag.
Has anybody not heard of that?
Clay, have you heard of that?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Did you ever used to do the, what was it, Star 87, Star 86?
Star 69.
No, it wasn't that one.
Yeah, it was.
Yes, it was.
It was 100% Star 69.
To hide your caller ID.
Was it really?
Yes.
100%.
That doesn't seem correct.
That was totally correct. That's how it's been the entire time. It
No, I'm
still
not-
works. You
I'm
can
not
still
following.
do that.
Can you? I don't.
Sorry,
Well, if
Star
you type in the
67.
whole, yeah.
Star 67.
I knew it wasn't Star 69. I knew it wasn't, because if it was Star 69, I would have known. I would have known. What's up, Bean? Bean Kersey.
Anyway, TikTok, because you missed it, we're going live on YouTube, so turn into YouTube. Tune in to YouTube. Turn on the YouTube. Those are the things.
Turn your TV dial to YouTube.
Turn tube the U.
That actually would be cool. You know what I'm a fan of is I like physical dials and buttons. And it would be cool if you had, you know, like how on old TVs it actually had dials. It would be cool if you had, for a smart TV, a dial that was set to some of the different applications. So like a Netflix, and then you could literally turn it to a YouTube.
You wouldn't have to like back out of everything.
Yeah, that would be kind of neat.
I think they did away with that because it was unfunctional.
You can do that on the remote. You can just.
I know you could do it on a remote, but
You'd then have to get up and go to the TV to turn it.
I don't know. I like
You're going to do that?
Or you could have a dial on the remote.
I have something we need. Oh, actually, I don't know if we're allowed to mention it on the podcast, so I probably shouldn't mention it here.
Yeah, probably not then. When in doubt, don't speak it out loud, is what they say. Loose lips sink ships. What's up, everybody? P.S. We're on YouTube.
Oh, check out these things, guys.
So you should go to the YouTube because we're probably going to end this in like 2 minutes.
So my girlfriend gets her eyelashes done.
No, you're not about to. No, you're not about to. I know that you're not about to pull out. What you're about to pull out, Clay. I know you're not. I know you're not. Hold on. Clay's going to pull out
Hopefully.
his new favorite tool. And this, I have no words.
So my girlfriend gets her eyelashes done. And every time you get your eyelashes done, apparently you get one of these things. And it is nice for people who don't have nice, vibrant mustaches like yourselves and have to comb them and keep them nice.
That wouldn't work on mine.
I don't think it would work. It might. Let me see it. This is said implement that he was talking about. It's literally like this is. I've never seen one by itself.
Yeah, they use them. She uses it, and she has like 60 of them. So
I've only ever seen them like integrated into the cap of a mascara bottle.
Well, that's not what that is.
It looked. Yeah, this is not really. Literally a plastic fork works better.
But you guys don't need to comb yours because yours are long enough that they're heavy enough that they stay down. Mine isn't long enough, so it curls up on my lip. So I have to.
If you like, kind of, you'd have to spin it. Yeah, everybody's joining in. It's like outdoorsman 29. What's going on? Clay just discovered that this is a great tool for combing his mustache, and I'm testing it out on mine, and it doesn't work on mine. So. That's what y'all are getting.
Really
on
riveting things here.
That's what y'all are getting on this stream today.
Good work, Clay.
Yeah, literally a plastic fork would work better than that on my mustache. Have you tried using a mustache wax?
No.
Well, that would help. If you used a mustache wax, it would stay. You could comb it and it would stay.
No, I'm not trying to pay for that stuff.
It's like maybe $5.
Apparently, on this episode of the
lure
Redneck
these
Tech
days.
Podcast, we're just talking about mustaches.
Bean goes, Clay's quote, isn't long enough, end quote, laughing emoji. All right, guys, that's enough of this very informative section of the Redneck Tech Podcast live on Instagram and TikTok. What we're going to do now is transition to the... he was combing it. You missed it. We're going to transition to the YouTube. So if you a real one, we're going to see you on there. If you ain't,
We won't.
then I don't know what to tell you.
Head to YouTube, peoples.
Head to YouTube.
Redneck Tech Podcast on YouTube.
Redneck Tech Podcast on YouTube. We're live.
Redneck Tech Podcast on
Redneck Tech
YouTube. We're
Podcast on
live.
YouTube. We're live.
One more time.
We're live.
Peace.
We had 31 there's 261 viewers on there.
What do they count as a view, though?
Anybody that clicks on it and views it for a certain amount of seconds. And 1 new follower. Good for us.
Nice. Look at us go. All right.
Let's do something useful here.
Devin and Nathan.
Hey, Devin finally paid attention.
Did Nathan I see that you now have Winter Productions, open parentheses, Nathan Winterstein.
I appreciate that.
Close
That's helpful.
parentheses now. Did we cause that? Did we cause you to change your entire YouTube name? so that we would know? Because after last time I knew it, but now it's definitively in stone. Everybody knows that.
That's really what it's about.
Devin asks, what's up, Devin? Hey, are you guys live on YouTube?
You were there for this.
I'm not sure. Are we? Are we live on YouTube? He asks in the YouTube live.
Oh, man.
I do appreciate some good irony. That was a good one, Devin. I like that. Tim says, sup, gents, and Ryer. What does that imply? What are you implying about me? That I'm not a gent? I'm not a gentleman? I could be a gentleman. I open doors.
To cupboards.
Excuse you. So do you. You leave cupboards open. That's what you do.
When I'm using them.
You weren't using the cupboard yesterday when it was open. If we're going to make cupboard jokes. Not that I actually care. Yes, it's all Ryer's fault. Yeah, that'll happen. If you've been around long enough, you'll understand.
All right. Well, we should probably do something productive now.
We are.
Since we
are. Don't rush it. Don't rush it. I hate being rushed. I'm going to mute all of us, and then we're going to do the Redneck Tech Podcast open.
Do the
and
drop.
We'll jump into it. So, goodbye. The Redneck Tech Podcast is brought to you by MicsArchery.com. They're a one-stop shop for virtually everything archery, bow hunting, and for your next outdoor adventure. Mike's Archery has been at the top of the archery game for over 50 years, and they want to give listeners of the Redneck Tech Podcast 10% off their entire online store using the code REDNECK10, all one word. Just put the code in before you check out, and your boys will hook you up. The guys at Mike's have always been good to us, and now they can be good to you too. Visit MicsArchery.com and get your gear now.
Right here. Yeah. You want him? Yeah.
I just realized I forgot to hit record, so we have to do all of that again. I pulled a clay. So you guys get to watch that again. Today's topic is what does it take to do a podcast? And number one is brain cells. And
the record button.
I clearly have not acquired
Record button helps a lot.
said brain cells. So we're going to redo that, and we'll be back. The Redneck Tech Podcast is brought to you by MicsArchery.com. They're a one-stop shop for virtually everything archery, bow hunting, and for your next outdoor adventure. Mike's Archery has been at the top of the archery game for over 50 years, and they want to give listeners of the Redneck Tech Podcast 10% off their entire online store using the code REDNECK10, all one word. Just put the code in before you check out, and your boys will hook you up. The guys at Mike's have always been good to us, and now they can be good to you too. Visit MicsArchery.com and get your gear now.
Right here. Yeah. You want him? Yeah.
Welcome to the Redneck Tech Podcast. This is episode 152. That's 152. And we are talking about podcast today on the podcast. The official title is So You Want to Have a Podcast, and this is part 1 of 3, where we're going to be talking about some of the requirements of today having a podcast. Next week we'll be talking about web shows, and the week after that we're going to be talking about TV shows. But we have a lot of guys who ask us, hey, I want to have a podcast. Hey, I want to have a web show. Hey, I want to have a TV show. What does it take? What do I need to know to do that? And so we thought we'd do a little series on exactly that. So we are going to be going over what you'll need gear-wise, what you're going to need software-wise, what you're going to need subscription-wise, what kind of assets you may need to look at creating and having, as well as kind of what the back end of having a podcast requires. And the same thing for all of the other things, web shows and TV shows later. So we've got the usual 2 suspects co-hosting with me today. We've got the K-Meister, Keegan.
Don't ever say that again.
We got to find him a nickname. I'm just going to keep throwing things out till we find one. Can you say hello to the folks, Keegan?
Not with that introduction.
Perfect. Muted indefinitely.
Neat.
Clayblade.
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
What was the nickname that we're supposed to have stick for you?
Crash.
Crash. Nope. Because you kind of liked it. And therefore you cannot have it.
Yeah. Did people know why?
Yes.
Oh,
Are you guys hearing that buzzing? Or is it just me?
I hear it.
Where do you think that's coming from?
I don't know.
I wish I could figure it out, but I can't. So, like, I've tried everything that I could think to do, but we're just gonna have to carry on. As always, we usually stream these on YouTube, so you can watch it on YouTube after the fact if you're a person who likes to watch podcasts.
Like, comment,
And
subscribe, turn on your notifications.
Smash that subscribe button. Demolish the like button.
Leave us a comment down below.
Wreck that comment bar. That might get an indefinite mute. I never want to hear that noise in my headphones ever again. Never. I don't ever want to hear that.
Well, first things first, to have a podcast, you need to have an entertaining crew.
Something like that.
And if this isn't entertainment, I don't know what is.
I'm entertained, and that's really all I care about. So let's talk, I think, generally about things to consider before you even look at purchasing gear for your podcast. I think that, and it's become kind of a meme to have a podcast, because it seems like everybody and their brother has a podcast where they all get together and they talk about things. I think that it is important for, if you're going to have a podcast, to really kind of understand what the purpose of the podcast is and what you want to say with the podcast. And try to have kind of a unique spin, you know? I think that getting around and talking about things is cool, but if you want to garner a listenership and an audience, then you either have to have some kind of knowledge on the things that you're talking about that maybe people who are listening don't have or would like to have, or a perspective on things that people would like to have or hear from, or a take, or you're funny, or something like that. So when you're thinking about having a podcast, just try to kind of think of, what's my differentiating factor? What makes me unique, or what will make this podcast unique, and separate it from the mass of podcasts. I mean, if you go on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you guys get your podcasts, there's a lot of places. There's so many. There are so many podcasts just in general in the world. And similarly, there's that many hunting podcasts.
Do you know a couple of the top 3? They might not be 1, 2, and 3, but are podcasts about the news, podcasts about music, and then podcasts about like murder mysteries.
That would
Those
make
are-
sense.
Those are some of the top 3.
Well, just from my listening habits,
I've listened to.
I like
none
to
of
listen
those.
to news podcasts like in the morning sometimes. I like murder mystery crime podcasts when I'm driving places. I don't really listen to music podcasts. I know there are some. I've listened to a few music podcasts that like dissect some albums. And they were dissecting an album from one of my favorite artists, so I listened to that one, but can't say I've really listened to many music podcasts. I'd rather just listen to music. And usually they don't have the rights to play the music. So, like, how are you going to talk about it and not play it? Especially if they're talking about, like, dissecting the music and what the artist is doing behind the scenes and stuff like that. Musically, like, I want to be able to hear that. So I haven't listened to many music podcasts, but what kind of podcasts do you listen to, Keegan?
90% of the podcasts that I listen to have something to do with in the outdoor creative space or about photography in general or videography. Listen to a lot of like wedding photographers and their podcasts.
Clay?
First off, rude. Someone's phone just went off.
It was my computer, but also my phone.
You tell me that new M1 chip doesn't have a live podcast sensor on it, knowing it should mute itself?
No, it doesn't. This isn't radio. This is a podcast. I don't have like a delay. I don't have the oh crap button. I wish I did.
First thing when starting a podcast, mute your stuff.
I muted both mine.
We've really had.
I muted this.
We've had a lineup of oopsies today. You started the
well,
live.
I
without,
muted this. I forgot
Quite
that
a
it.
start
Yeah.
to tell people about the things they need to know about a podcast.
We didn't hit record. We got.
See, we didn't have to
phones
put that in this
going off.
version. That could have been lost to the internet.
Didn't hit record. Phone going off.
I think it's. I
if
think
Clay
it's.
would have done it, you would have
100%,
rode that
so
horse
don't-
into the desert,
exactly.
out of water, and
You
then
would've-
got off and walked a little longer.
Exactly.
Whistled the tune about
would have-
how
I
Clay
would have.
messed up.
Okay.
I would have.
Thank you, Keegan.
I would have, but I didn't know if Clay was going to. And just because I would have doesn't mean I can't put up a fight that somebody does it to me. I'm a giant hypocrite. Giant.
We know.
You guys have seen me drive.
That's
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
it is a scary time in my life.
Caleb says y'all can't function without me. I got this entire thing set up from scratch, Caleb. I did it on my laptop. We're here. We're doing it. We're doing the things. What podcast do you listen to?
I listen to just hunting podcasts. I
Okay.
listen to Dudley's podcast.
He does have a good podcast.
Yeah, when he puts them out, he's just so busy. It's hard
Yeah.
for him to get them out. But I listen to Dudley's podcast. I listen to the Kafaru podcast. And I listen to one that the Forum Rock Slide puts out.
Hmm.
I listen to their podcast because it's like pretty gear centric. So I'm one of those guys that's like a gear junkie, but
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have gear because I don't need it nor can I afford it. So I listen to it in
Never
the
buy things.
I listen
You won't
it,
buy
I
anything.
listen it to the in the event I do have to buy something, but I just listen to hunting podcasts.
I think you just like to think about buying things.
I do.
I think that turns you on.
I have
then
an
you don't buy
entire
it.
backcountry gear list that I will probably never fulfill because we'll probably never have to go in the backcountry. I hope we do. That would be awesome. That would be fun. But
Yeah,
never-
I would like to do that a lot.
yeah, never probably getting to do that.
So, all in all, most of us listen to podcasts to get information, usually from people who are more knowledgeable or have a different perspective than we do. So, rule number 1 of starting a podcast:
Know your audience.
know your audience, know what you have to say, and try to differentiate yourself somehow, and have something unique to say, or a unique way to say it. I think that's important to consider. And yeah. Step 2 is you're going to have to get some gear to record the pressure waves that your vocal box creates that come out of your mouth. AKA, you're going to need a microphone, as that's what sound is. I want this. I want a picture of this right now because the looks that I'm getting from both Keegan and Clay are just amazing. And they're trying to make me feel bad about what I just said, but I think it's hilarious. Step 2, you're going to need some gear to record yourself. So we get this question a lot, and like any other question, the gear that you get is entirely dependent on how much you want to spend on it. You can spend $0 or you can spend a lot of dollars. You can literally take your phone and speak into the voice recorder app on like without headphones and make a podcast that way. Would I necessarily recommend that? No, but you can do that. You can also take a pair of Apple headphones and speak into those right into your phone and record a podcast that way. You could
plug headphones into a laptop.
Yeah,
you can record them that way.
Yep. There's a way you can do it for very, very little money.
You can get
microphones that'll plug into a phone, that'll plug into your computer. I know a lot of people do those. What are they? The Blue Yetis.
You can get a like an $80 or $100 Zoom audio recorder and a microphone and plug it right into that. And it kind of goes the same way as we say like your lenses are kind of more important than your body when we talk about video and photography. Your microphone is, in a general speaking, more important than what the audio is going into. Because if you have this giant board that we have, but you're talking through iPhone headphones, that giant board isn't going to make your iPhone headphones sound like what we're sounding like now.
No, and any recording device is just usually going to take raw audio directly from your microphone and just record it. And then it's up to you what you do with it. So you're really, like you said, dependent on the microphone for the majority of how good your audio sounds. So I would say if you've got money to spend, get a good microphone. You can spend anything from $85 for like the microphones that we use. We used to use them, or I used to use them for the podcast, but now we use them pretty much for just voiceover work. In our offices, I think these are like ATR, Audio-Technica, USB mics, like ATR 200s or 2100s or something. I'll look it up real quick. And they're like $85 a mic. They literally look like just a regular handheld microphone that you would hand somebody on a stage. They come with a pop filter. They come with a little stand, like a little tripod stand. It's not super useful, but you can use that.
Also, if you have Lav Mics,
you can use those.
You can just use Lav Mics and plug them into some type of device that records audio, and you've got that.
Yep. So if you have some of like Lav Mics, like you said, you can use those. You can start getting the microphones at like $85. You can get, there's a lot of people use those Blue Yetis. Those are like $110. And then you can really just go up from there. There's studio quality microphones that cost multiple hundreds of dollars. Like I can't say off the top of my head what Joe Rogan is using, but like those are very high-end microphones. So you could spend a lot of money on a microphone, but you don't have to. We use these Audio-Technica, what are they? BPHS ones. And the reason that we use these is because, one, they come integrated with headphones. Headphones are not necessarily a requirement.
But Ryer likes to hear himself talk.
I do, because I have a silky smooth voice, hence the nickname Red Velvet. That was designated to me. I did nothing to earn that but have this voice. So I do like to hear myself talk sometimes. But one of the reasons to have headphones is so that you can monitor what your microphones are picking up. So You probably want to have at least one pair of headphones. Again, you can use just any old Apple or whatever headphones that you've got laying around to monitor. And you can also go spend money on studio headphones if you want to. Those range anywhere from $50 to $500, $750. Really, whatever you want to spend. I've got some Sennheiser ones, just kind of basic monitoring ones that I've used just for video editing and stuff, and those work pretty good. And I think they're maybe 150, something like that. And I've had them for 5 years or something like that. The reason that we have these is twofold. One, they come with the headphones. Two, the microphone is connected to them. So, A, for travel, we can throw all 4 of these in a case, and it takes up a little less room, and everything's all connected. Two, it makes it very easy to make sure you're getting good quality audio when the microphone is directly attached to your face, and you can't speak away from it. Same thing with headphones. One of the main reasons that I recommend that people get sets of headphones for their guests, especially if you're using a microphone that is highly directional or one that they can easily turn away from and not speak into the capture pattern of the microphone, is headphones help guests self-correct that. Subconsciously, people know, like, they can hear themselves, and when they start talking off the mic and their audio levels drop, they'll self-correct and start talking back into the mic where their audio levels are higher. It just kind of helps them self-regulate where they need to be talking into the mic. With these, you don't have to worry about that. You can slap them on anybody, and if they are a little soft or their audio doesn't sound the best, you can just kind of tell them to reposition their microphone, and you're good to go. So that's kind of why we have these. They're, I think, initially built for broadcasting, but they plug right up into the board, and it's really an easy way to do it. BPHS1. I'm going to look up exactly how much these are so that you guys know. These ones are about $200 a pop, so not bad, especially when you're getting a mic and a pair of headphones with it. Like I said, you can spend as much as you want on any of these things. And we're going to try to give you at least kind of what we're using. Past that, Google searches are your best friend. So once you've got the microphones, you're going to need something to record into. Like I said, could be your phone. It could be your computer. You can just record directly into a computer if you've got a mic that has USB capabilities. There's ways you can do it if you don't have a mic that has USB capabilities, but we're not going to get into those here. They're kind of a pain in the butt sometimes. So if you know you're going to be recording into a computer, just make sure you get a microphone that has like a USB out so that you can just plug that right into your computer. The ATR 2100s or whatever they are have that, and that's what we use a lot for just recording scratch audio and random voiceover in the studio downstairs. Past that, you can start looking at independent audio recorders. Zoom has a bunch of them. I don't know what version they're up to. I want to say it's H5, H6. But basically, these are handheld audio recorders. They come with microphones that sit on top of them, but you can also plug microphones into them. Each of them has kind of different specs as to how many microphones you can plug into them and what they'll do. But essentially, you plug the microphones in, hit record your podcasts, and it spits you out an audio file. You can get those used probably for like $100 if you get one of the older versions, all the way up to $350 for a Zoom H6, which I think is kind of what they're up to now. So
The very, 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 very early episodes of this podcast, Caleb recorded on a Zoom H something,
yeah.
and we still have that.
Mm-hmm. And it's also dual purpose. A lot of guys use those in the field for audio recording. So you can plug your Lav Mics in, you can plug your boom mics in, you can plug your shotgun mics into it. You can go and collect ambient audio with the little stereo mic it's got on top. It's a really very versatile tool. So like if you get one, you can also use it for video if that's something that you're also involved in. Past that, you can get a mixing board that will plug into a computer and record. I used to do that. But, I think the next best option past a independent audio recorder is probably something like what we run. It's a super, super common setup. We have the Rodecaster Pro, and basically all of our headphones plug into this, which is kind of an all-in-one audio recording, broadcasting, mixing board. The cool thing about this board is it's all self-contained, and by the end, you press record, talk into it.
If you press record.
If you press record, yes. And yeah, y'all are doing great. You just sit there and berate me. That'll work great. That'll be perfect. People love that. You press record, record your audio, press record again. It records it all to an SD card, and it has basically all of the post-processing that you would usually need to do in a software applied in line, so applied to the file as you're talking, so that when you are done, you basically have a file that's ready for publishing. You can program. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 buttons that you can program with different preloaded sounds. And so, like what we do is we've got all of our open and close sounds in there. If you've got sponsor stuff, if you've got mid-roll ads, whatever it is, you can pre-record it, load it on those buttons, and you can do it all live, basically, and get a file that's got everything in it. If you don't have something like this, usually the workflow is you record the audio. It spits out probably a WAV file, which is the audio equivalent of a RAW file. It may spit out an MP3 if you want it to. And then you have to bring that file into an audio editing program. So there's some open source ones that I can't remember the name of, but I know that Apple has its Logic. I think it's called Logic Studio or something like that. Some people can use GarageBand. Premiere has Audition, and then I forget the name of it. I used it like twice. But there's some open source audio editing programs, and you can do all of your post-processing. Because what you'll find is that when you record into just a recorder and you get the file back, it doesn't sound as nice as like this would, or as what you're used to hearing on the radio or on other podcasts. And that's because those either have inline compressors and equalizers and things like that to help sweeten and not condense, level the audio, sweeten and level the audio, or they've done that in post. So another thing to keep in mind, if you have the skills or you want to learn how to do that, then any recorder is probably going to be good. If you don't know how to do that, something like this might be a little bit of a better option for you because it has all of those things built in. You don't have to touch any settings, and what you're hearing right now comes out of the board without you having to do anything to it. Like, we don't have to take this and put it into a program to make it sound like this. Of course, if you're fine with your audio sounding exactly like how it does off of a recorder with no post-processing, then have at it. Send her. I personally would advocate learning how to post-process your audio so that you can make it sound really nice, get it in level, make it sound really sweet and sultry, make your voice sound super great, and then send it out. What? Look, everybody can make their voice sound nice.
I didn't
called-
say anything. Don't look at me.
I'm just looking. I'm just looking around. Just looking around at the audience. I got.
Really, to me, the advantage of having that board is, like, if you look back at some of the original podcasts, at some of the, like, shows you guys were at when you were recording in hotel rooms, and you only had, like, a couple microphones, and then all of a sudden it was getting, like, passed around, and it
Yeah.
was where now you can plug all these in and just run with it. And
I'm listening.
Are you saying if it's a microphone?
Mm-hmm.
You gotta turn your 3 down then. Turn your 3 down and talk and see what it does. But this board, also the good thing about it is you can plug up to 4 microphones in it. Where like most of the Zooms, I think the most you'll get is 2. Your iPhone, you're just gonna get 1. We can put 4 audio channels into this board. So doing
Plus a
this-
phone, plus a USB input.
Correct.
You can Bluetooth your phone, take calls.
Right.
Um,
So like when we have the class and people are like asking questions at the class and stuff, we're up here with our 3 headsets on, and then we have a XLR out through one of the channels with just a regular handheld microphone that's being passed around the people that are here for the class.
Yeah.
And they're able to do that. I mean, other than hearing 9 different voices and at a time, you can't tell that that's what we're doing.
Yep.
So,
and this will also spit you out a raw multi-track if you want it.
yes.
Some people like that. So basically it'll spit out a separate track for every input stream or every input that you've got going into the board. So I think probably like 6 or 7 tracks, and it'll spit out a raw file. So it'll be a WAV file. There's no compression. It will be free of any of the inline effects that you might have set. And so if you're somebody who wants to edit your podcast, like cut sections out of it, or when people aren't talking, cut that out, or process each channel individually, you have the ability to do that with the board. We don't do that. I think it sounds great off the board. We don't need to mess
What's
with
the board cost?
that board. It's like $650. No, that's with 2 headphones.
Both.
Rodecaster Pro Podcast Production Studio, $494 right now on Amazon.
It's not awful for what it is.
No, I mean, all in all, for the exact setup that we've got, say $500 for the board, 2, 4, 6, 8. That's what, $1,300? $1,300 all in all, and you're going to get a podcast that sounds exactly like this, with as much work as it takes to load the sounds up, hit record, plug your stuff in, and talk.
Yeah, uploading those sounds is easy.
Yeah, they have an app. You can do it on your computer. You can plug it in via USB and do it that way.
When we did the whole sports intro thing, we edited it, airdropped it to my phone, plugged my phone in Bluetoothed it to the board, and put it on through Bluetooth.
Yeah,
That's
it's
easy.
super, super easy. For if you've got that much money to spend, I would say spend it on this.
yeah,
It's
if you're
there's really
serious about it.
yeah.
That's really not that much money, and
No.
you don't need to start with 4. You can start with a board and 1 headset,
Yeah,
or 2 headsets, and go
Easily.
from there.
it's really as a proponent of workflows, it's the easiest workflow of any solution that you could have.
Right. I think it's one of those things that people look at and it kind of intimidates them.
Yeah,
Like if they were to look at a thumbnail picture of it on a website or whatever, it would intimidate them. But, I mean, as long as you hit record and turn the volume on, like, you honestly can't mess it up. Because
No.
you don't have to use the preloaded buttons. If you don't want to use the preloaded buttons and each episode you ever have is going to have a different sponsor or something, and you have that audio on your computer, you can throw it into Audition or even throw it into Premiere and put that at the front and the end and be done with it. Export your MP3 and be done.
yeah. Yeah. So when you're choosing what you want to use as far as the gear stuff, obviously consider your budget, consider how much you want to spend, consider how you want your podcast to sound. If you literally don't care, then that narrows your it doesn't really narrow your options, but you may not have to spend as much. Consider how much time you want to spend processing your audio if you want it to sound nice, because either you have to get something like this or you have to post-process your audio and kind of make that decision from there. Like we said, you can get as expensive as you want with gear, but I think this is a really, really good solution for just about anybody, unless you just don't have the money to spend on it, in which case, I would check out kind of a couple of the other options that we presented earlier, and then learn how to post-process your audio. It's not super hard, and usually if you figure out how to do it one time, you kind of do the same thing every time, and your stuff's going to sound nice. Just takes a little bit of YouTubing, a little bit of finagling, a little bit of extra time on the back end, but it's not that big of a deal. I have faith in all of you guys to learn that.
I know I have a buddy, Levi with Goose Gossip Podcast, that he did probably 75, 80 episodes before he got aboard. And the second he got aboard, that first podcast, he was like, why did I ever do it without it?
Yeah. It's just so easy. It's so easy. I wish I could show you guys like a physical example right now of what like a raw, unprocessed something would sound like versus this, so that you people who are listening can hear the difference. But like this just sounds so nice, and it takes zero work.
Yeah.
It just comes out like that. It's beautiful. So yeah, those are your recording solutions. So once you have decided what you're going to talk about and talked about it, you then have to take that and put it somewhere. And this is where the kind of the back end stuff gets kind of wishy-washy, complicated a little bit, but once you set it up one time, you don't have to set it up again. You have to choose what's called a hosting service. There's a variety of hosting services online. We use SoundCloud. I've used in the past a service called Libsyn. I know there's one called Burberry or something like that, and probably a handful of others, Podbean, maybe. I don't know all of them off the top of my head. There's a bunch of them. We use SoundCloud, so we know it works. A lot of people use SoundCloud. It's really easy to use. And essentially, what you're looking for, again, it's called a podcast host or a hosting service, is somewhere where you're going to upload your podcasts. And then what that host is going to do is create for you an RSS feed. RSS feeds are kind of outdated mostly in the internet world. They used to be used as a way to basically collect regularly published content from around the web in a singular place. People don't really do that anymore, especially because we have social media and email and stuff like that. But essentially what an RSS feed is, for as far as you're concerned, is a place where your podcast lives, that other audio services can look to find it and publish it to theirs. So you're going to have a podcast host. You'll upload to the podcast host, and that it will give you an RSS feed. And then you have to go and set up that RSS feed in like your iTunes, in your Spotify's of the world, in your Google Play Store. There's probably one or two that I'm missing, but those are kind of your big ones. To make sure that when you push your podcast or upload your podcast up to whatever service is hosting your podcast, it then pushes your podcast out to all of the platforms. So you have to obviously set up your hosting, and then you have to go and set up each individual service, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play Store. You have to go set up your RSS feed manually within those within those, I'll call them applications, but within those services one time. And then once you've done that, you're good, unless something breaks. But we've never had that happen. And all you have to do after you do that is just upload your podcast to whoever you're hosting with. There's step-by-steps on how each service wants you to, create accounts and connect your RSS feeds, but it's pretty simple, and it just, like I said, takes one time doing. I would suggest, if you're going to have a podcast, to set up like a Gmail account for said podcast, because you're going to need emails and whatnot for setting up accounts with your hosting services, with all of these different, the iTunes, Spotify's, Google Plays, to set up accounts with them so that you can publish your RSS feed through them. And it just kind of makes it easy to have an email. Plus, if you've got one, then people can contact you at that email. And it's not super hard to set up an email, obviously. I assume everybody here has set up an email, so, right? Have you set up an email before?
Never once.
Really?
I actually don't have email.
Oh. Wow. Got a couple of internet newbies here, so.
Yeah, I still use a landline.
I guess we'll do a
Landline. I'm still using pigeons.
I was going to say, Clay and I we've got a flock
Don't
of
tell
6
Chuck
pigeons.
Belmore that. You ain't gonna have any pigeons left.
Chuck's going to play spy and go capture all of our messages by shooting down the carrier pigeons.
Oh.
That used to be, that probably happened. There was probably people
100%
trying to
happened.
capture carrier pigeons.
100% that happened.
Like someone was
All
trying
the
to
time.
someone was trying to snitch on someone else, and they're like people sitting at windows with muskets just shooting pigeons
Or nets.
or
I mean,
rocks.
even like World War I, they were shooting down pigeons.
How do you get that job?
That's a great job for Chuck. Chuck could definitely be a spy if that was the main activity required for
Or a
spying.
As long as it
He'd
wasn't
be a great
sneaking
spy.
around.
Yeah. He wouldn't be a great sneaker, but he'd be a great pigeon catcher.
I don't think there's a lot of catching that
No.
he'd be doing.
No. Just, he'll catch pigeons the same way we catch deer. You know what I mean? So, you got it. Yes.
This is funny. So Alaskans, when they go moose hunting, they don't say we're gonna go moose hunting. They go, yeah, we're gonna go catch a moose.
Really?
Mm-hmm. First time I heard that, I just about rolled laughing. It was hilarious.
I've never heard that. That's interesting.
That's what all locals say. We're gonna go catch a moose.
Well, I guess it's not technically wrong everywhere then, huh?
Fun fact.
Winter Productions, who I'm still not sure who that is. Who's Winter Productions? I don't know. I wish it had a name in parentheses next to it that I could tell. But alas, I don't know. Says it's worth it. And also says Anchor. Yes, I forgot about that one. Good call. Anchor is another podcast hosting service. And then our boy Jason said, I was thinking about starting a podcast this morning. You should, Jason. I'm sure everybody would like to hear the luxurious sounds of your voice on the interwebs. Almost as much as they'd like to hear mine. Actually, probably more.
100%.
Because people, even though my voice sounds nice sonically, people are annoyed with the things that I say.
100%.
Facts.
It happens. Can't please everybody. So, you have figured out what you're going to talk about. You have talked about it. You have put it out into the interwebs. Now what? Now what do we do? This is kind of where Keegan will talk more now, because now we talk about... I forgot one thing. We'll get back to you, Keegan. I know you're very excited to talk about what you don't know you're going to talk about yet. Naming your podcast, you have to figure out a good name.
That
Obviously,
helps a
that
lot.
goes without saying. I should have mentioned that earlier, but it slipped my mind. It's one of those things that I take for granted when you're talking about figuring out what you're going to have a podcast on. But figure out a good name. Figure out a name that kind of helps viewers understand what it is that you're going to be talking about, is slightly descriptive and catchy and memorable, obviously, just like anything. And then you're also going to need either a logo and or album art. It's called album art, but it's basically a thumbnail image. So when you're creating a podcast, also think about you're going to need to create some kind of digital identity and a group of assets surrounding that podcast brand, right? So you're going to need to either make a logo. There's a lot of services online that you can kind of make one from scratch-ish. If you've got design skills, freaking go for it, do it. You can use Photoshop, you can use InDesign, you can use Illustrator, whatever it is. You can also hire a graphic designer to design a logo. And you're going to need something that is a square that appears next to your podcast on your RSS feeds, on your hosting, on all of the places where your podcast will appear. So that's something you'll need. I mean, I don't really know if I have a whole bunch of tips for that. I mean, that's more of a graphic design thing. But
university question.
Think about when people see your podcast, they're going to see a name, they might see what an episode is called, and then they're going to see that image. So whatever that image is needs to be something that's recognizable, needs to be something that will help tell viewers what the podcast is about, has to be something that'll catch their eye, and then something that's unique and cool and, not crazy busy, just basic kind of design stuff. Is there anything that else I should mention as far as that goes?
Your name needs to get the point across to what you're trying to talk about. Because otherwise, it just falls into the ethos of other podcasts.
Yeah.
When somebody wants to look up a hunting podcast, it helps if there's some, words in your name that narrow down your topic.
Mm-hmm. And I think the thumbnail is important, too, because I know when I've been looking at podcasts, you look at the thumbnail just the same way when you're looking at YouTube videos, you look at the thumbnail, and it gives you a visual indication of what you might be watching. If the thumbnail looks like it was done in Microsoft Paint or done in the 90s, I don't want to listen to that podcast.
Come on, you wouldn't listen to a podcast that was helped designed by Clippy?
Unless it was a very specific podcast and I knew that album art was ironic in some way, no.
But to piggyback off of that, if your podcast also sounds like it was created in Microsoft Paint,
people will not want to listen to it.
So you don't have to have a $1,300 setup, but if you can afford a little bit more to make it sound a little bit better, then you probably should.
Yeah, we should have stated that earlier.
Yeah, probably don't make the podcast driving down the road in your mud truck with loud
But
tires.
we have recorded with this exact setup in the truck, and you can't tell.
Yeah.
So that speaks for itself. So
Yes.
There definitely have been some podcasts that I've listened to some episodes where I really like this. And then I'll get to another episode, and they're on the phone with somebody that's in the car, and they're clearly just talking into their phone. And all you can hear is road noise and their blinker and them yelling at traffic. And I'm like, I'm done with this podcast now.
They're hitting the safety bumps on the side of the interstate.
I guess I thought that was, again, there's some things that sometimes I just don't think about saying because to me it's obviously. But yeah, if your audio sounds like trash, people are not going to want to listen to that. I mean, it's you wouldn't go.
Some things are obvious, but they still tell people that coffee's hot, so it's obviously not very obvious.
Yeah, I know.
Or not to drink gasoline.
It smells so sweet, though.
I do like the smell of gasoline.
Diesel's better.
Diesel does smell nice. Do you know
I
what
don't
smells
like the
better
smell of
than
diesel.
both of those?
He's going to say jet fuel.
Jet fuel. I love the smell of jet fuel. I love how airports smell, man. I love how airports smell. If I could get my entire
Do you
house.
spend a lot of time on the outside of an airport?
I mean, not a lot of time, but you can still smell the jet fuel inside the airport. I mean, there's a lot of that stuff floating around there. But I love jet fuel. Love it. My Bang
How do you
has.
smell jet fuel over the Cinnabon that you're standing in front of for 3 hours?
Personally, I just stick my nose in the window cracks and hope to get a whiff. You don't?
Modern construction would really hope that they wouldn't be getting airflow through the window cracks.
It only works in the really old, drafty airports, but you gotta try
Kansas
it still.
City, calling them out.
Audio quality is very important. If your audio sounds like absolute trash, nobody will listen to your podcast, I promise.
You were going to say something other than trash.
I had about four things. There was a hierarchy of things I was going to say, and I had to go through like 4 items before I found one that was appropriate for air.
And if you messed up, that's where a multi-track raw file would have been helpful, because we could have gone in and quacked you out or cut
But we
it
are
out.
live, though, so the live viewers would have seen that, listened to it.
Another thing that is helpful before we let Keegan talk about what he's going to talk about, because I know what Keegan's going to talk about,
I'm glad everybody else does.
is
I'm going to say what he's going to talk about, and then I want you to say what you thought it was and if you were correct.
having notes helps a lot, so you don't just sit there and
That comes later.
ramble.
We're getting there.
Oh.
We're getting to that part.
Oh.
Right now we're talking
But
about
you're
more
right.
technical requirements, but yes.
Oh.
Yeah. Clay, not say that. So yes, good quality audio. Please do what you can to ensure that you have good quality audio. Now, once you have created your digital assets and solidified your online identity, recorded your podcast, uploaded it to your podcast host, and set up all your RSS feeds so that everybody in the world with any streaming service or podcast service that they want can listen to it. You have to tell people that it exists. And in today's day and age, telling people that things exist fall squarely in the lap of the users of social media. And who better to talk about social media than I wish we had a clapping
Or a
thing.
drum roll.
Our one and only, the one and only
I need a new job.
social media extraordinaire man of the hour with a mullet. It's Keegan.
Yeah.
Is that what you thought we were going to have him talk about?
From
Haha.
promoting
Yes.
your podcast on social media.
So now we're going to start talking about all the back end stuff that's not physically creating the podcast.
You know
And-
what's awesome
What?
is you not only have to talk about the back end stuff for the podcast, but you have to talk about the back end stuff for a web show. You got to talk about this 2 more times after this, and I know you're excited.
Super, super excited.
Sorry, continue.
Honestly, can hardly stand in my seat.
So give us just a little bit of
Well,
a
obviously,
taste
with
of
anything, you
the-
need to promote it for it to be successful.
right.
A podcast is a product. You need to promote it the same way that you would promote a product or brand or anything. It is all of those things. So that's part of where having guests that are people that people want to listen to comes into play.
Yes.
That's a big one. You know, we have guests on here, and they're a lot of fun to listen to. Really mix it up. But, yeah, your social media, you know, you can do that in just having a page that's just dedicated to that podcast, or linking your podcast to, like, your personal page, especially if you're talking about your personal activities. You know, that's advantageous. But just making general awareness, you know, telling the boys, hey, I'm going to talk about this today. You know, that's why we do this live stuff, and why we have several platforms that we bounce that off of that surround this podcast. You know, giving people the information that what's going to happen, why it's happening, and being able to answer questions about it is kind of huge.
Yeah. Like you said, with anything, you have to garner an audience, and you have to keep your audience informed as to what's happening, when it's happening, and that your things exist. And
Consistency helps a lot. You know, if you can like we try and do it every Wednesday at 3. Try, big word. But I mean, that helps a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have super successful podcasts that air on a regular basis all the time. You know when they're going to air. And that's how they have a big audience.
Like the Redneck Tech podcast every Wednesday, except for when we're busy.
When we're busy
Did
every
you just
Wednesday.
tune back in?
I've
'Cause
been
we-
tuned in.
We literally just said that. You literally just parroted exactly what he said.
I know. I was rebuttaling, or not rebuttaling, restating.
Okay.
Reaffirming.
Backing up, revisiting, circling back. Any other corporate terms we could use there? I bet there are a few.
Like the Redneck Tech podcast, except when we're busy.
Every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's important to note.
Yeah, when you don't do that, your regular crew of listeners tend to get a little discouraged that the thing that they were looking forward to listening to at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
From the Redneck Tech podcast.
Yes, didn't air.
Because
I
we
know
were
I
busy.
get frequent messages from certain people, Devin, who, when we don't air the podcast,
Called out.
he wonders what's up.
I had someone with
Is he like doing a welfare check, or he's like, "Where's my podcast?"
Yes.
I had someone with the initials Lauren Brady ask me the same thing.
I like that. Was a good one.
Yeah,
That was
I
a
mean,
good one.
that's all a big thing. Consistency is huge with anything.
Right.
Otherwise, people don't know. So if you disappear for months, nobody's going to know or think about it. You just have to continue to stay relevant in people's minds.
What kind of things would you suggest are helpful to be putting on social media for somebody looking to build an audience and kind of garner a following, and then also make sure that they're interacting with and providing value to that following? Like, what kind of assets?
I mean, you kind of have to tell people what you're talking about or what your podcast is about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even just putting audio files like we use, is that Headliner?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll pull audio files from the podcast and then put those out there and give people a 15, 30-second clip of what that podcast was about or what we're talking about, so that maybe somebody will tune in, not on the live, because we're obviously doing that afterwards, but
Mm-hmm.
get people just thinking about it and seeing it, and then all of a sudden, once they see one of your podcasts and they think that's kind of cool, then they continue to listen. You know, and then all of a sudden you have listeners that have listened to all 152 episodes, and you've actually done something with it. You know, the hardest part is getting people to listen to it, but when you have a niche especially, and you're not just a broad thing that people are going to listen to, you know, a music podcast that talks about general music is going to attract a very broad audience. But a podcast even about this is a small niche in the hunting world. So you have to be able to get your name in front of people so that they actually want to listen and can get the value that you're providing. You know, and that value is something that people need to be able to see is there before they necessarily listen to it, unless they just stumble upon it.
How many hours a week do you think it would require to do a decent job at promoting your podcast brand on social media?
I don't think you'd have to really go crazy with it. I mean, you could do an hour or two a week would be enough, just as long as you work still. Consistency is everything. You know, that's how the social media platforms work. If you're consistent with it, it consistently shows up in people's faces.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really all that it's asking for, is just to be continually put in front of people. And then hopefully you're providing valuable enough information that somebody goes, hey, you should listen to this. And then you grow your audience from that.
Cool.
Word.
Yeah, just another consideration, you know. I think it's important. I personally think if you're going to have a podcast, then it probably needs its own space on social media. You can correct me if you think that I'm wrong, but I think that, you know, unless you're, like you said, talking literally just about your personal life, I would create a separate page for that podcast to live on, and then, just be cognizant that that page exists and put content out on it. Obviously, you're already creating a podcast, so you can use
you already have everything
Premiere,
already
you can
set up
use
to do it.
Audition, you can use any variety of editing softwares to pull clips, to post and publish those clips on social media. You can also use services like Headliner that do those little animation graphics that we do, just to
Those
kind of
audiograms.
yeah, I think they're called an audiogram. And just to kind of give your audio a little bit of a visual component. We film ours, which is a whole other set of requirements. We can talk about it briefly in a minute, but if you film yours, obviously you've got a video component, so you can use that. You can edit it in Premiere, and then obviously anything else that relates to your podcast, pictures, graphics, whatever. Just like anything else, you can go as hard or as light as you want on it. And social media is one of those things where the more effort and time you put into it, the higher dividends you'll get from it. And that's pretty consistent, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of with everything.
Yeah. So, just another thing to think about is when you have a podcast, you're also going to need a social media presence to promote the podcast. Past that, you start to get into kind of just the usual, hey, we've got to create things. And consistency requires that you have things to talk about on a consistent basis. And sometimes, I mean, we can all attest to it, it takes all three of us to figure out what we want to talk about that day. And so at first, for sure, like there's tons and tons of things to talk about. But the more you talk about different things, you start to narrow kind of that available pool of ideas that you've got. And then, you may have to spend some time researching or really just trying to figure out new things to talk about, or creating new like series to talk about, or new topics to explore, or finding people to talk to is something that takes time and takes mental resources, networking with those people, scheduling those people, and keeping up with those things are all skills and things that you'll need to dedicate time to.
Yeah, and that becomes easier, more difficult depending on what you're talking about. You know,
Right.
if you're solely educating, then you have to continually be creating educational content.
Right.
Where if you're doing a podcast where you're just talking, you're interviewing people, it makes it a little bit simpler because you always have new people
Mm-hmm.
that you're engaging with that are in the theme of what your podcast is.
Yep.
But you're reaching out where they have a completely different life story that they can talk about, or different experiences, which in a lot of regards make that easier as long as you just have people lined up to do it.
Yep.
I mean, if you're somebody that travels around, you're just going place to place and you know where to go, and you can talk to these people about that, or you can talk about the place that you're in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just think it's something worth noting that at some point you'll have to spend time doing some of those things.
Yeah,
and then
that's where, like, Clay talked about having
Yeah.
notes,
Yep, that was the next thing I was getting to.
you know.
And Clay can now get to that.
Notes. Have notes. Notes. Lots of them. No, I just think, like, why do I sound muffled? Or is that just me?
I guess it's because you're going to need to put the microphone close to your mouth.
Oh.
Your mustache was in the way.
Well, like, when you're first starting out, you have so many things that you can talk about that just listing them out so that when you talk about them, you can cross them off.
Mm-hmm.
Just because instead of having to be like, oh, I have to do a podcast today, what am I going to talk about? And then not being able to come up with something versus having a list when you start out with 50 topics, like there you go. You've got 50 podcasts right there. And then at some point between that first podcast and that 50th podcast, something else will come to mind that you can add to that list. So it just makes it easier for you to do podcasts, where we don't do that, but we probably should.
We do. It just, like with anything, we get really busy doing a lot of other stuff,
Yeah.
and sometimes,
At 2:00, we're like, oh, hey, we have to podcast in an hour and a half. What does everyone want to talk about?
yeah.
And then just notes, which we do often for most of the podcasts, is having a notes for each podcast. That way it keeps you on track and you're not rambling, and it kind of, especially if you're like our podcast, we talk about gear and things like that, having those things written in notes, what the name of it is, what it costs, where you could find it, just so you don't have to spend an extra 45 seconds, searching it, because
He says
I'm-
after I had to spend 45 seconds
well, no,
searching
but
gear
I'm
today.
sure there's some type of algorithm that goes out that, like, a 1-hour podcast gets better engagement than a 25 or 30-minute podcast. I'm sure there's something out there, but if your 1 hour is full of an hour's worth of information versus 5 minutes combined of you searching for stuff or rambling or trying to think of what you're going to talk about next, it just makes the podcast flow easier.
Yeah, you lose people if
Yeah.
all of a sudden you have big gaps in what you're trying to talk
Right.
about.
And if you don't want those gaps in there, then you have to go in and cut them out and edit them and throw the podcast back together. So,
Your
Yep.
notes also help in being able to write the description of the podcast,
right.
because that description on Spotify or YouTube or wherever it is can go a long way when somebody's trying to, they see the title, they read the description and go, oh, okay, I actually want to listen to this.
Mhm.
This sounds like I'm going to gain something from it.
Right.
Where if you have a bad description of what you're talking about, people are probably less apt to listen to it,
Right.
because it doesn't seem like they're going to gain anything because you didn't put the extra effort in to make an accurate description about it. And that's, like you're saying, links to stuff and like gear, having all that stuff already down. You can add that into your description and people can go, especially on like a YouTube.
Yeah.
Well, and if you're going to have like a guest on, kind of having them write down, like if I'm going to have Ryer on my podcast and I want to talk about whatever, editing the music, I'd like to see a note of what he wants to talk about. That way, if there's anything that needs to be added to my notes, I can add that. But two, like, if his version of a podcast editing the music is completely different than what I want to talk about, I want to make sure we're both on the same page before we get 30 minutes into a podcast, and it's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
And also along the same lines, if you're going to have a guest-based podcast, it's just good form to have some information on your guest and to have some things prepared to talk about.
Speaking of that, with guests, yes, having something prepared, but also to prepare the guest on do's and don'ts. Because there are a lot of guests that maybe aren't regular on podcasts, that wouldn't think about some things. And like you've done several times in the last hour, you think some things are obvious, but they aren't obvious to everybody.
Right.
So to be able to prepare that guest and say, hey, these are the things that I don't want you to do. These are the things that I want you to do. Please try not to say these things, or try not to be sitting here clicking stuff while you're talking.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause that happens a lot, and it sounds bad.
Informing them if it's a PG-13 or rated R podcast, probably
Mhm.
important.
That little
How to-
background goes a long ways.
How to speak into a microphone, especially if you've got microphones that are independent of the speaker's face. And even like just now, I had to have Keegan move his microphone a little bit because I could hear it was soft. But informing them as to, okay, you want to talk at this part of the microphone because this is the part of the microphone that's going to make your voice sound the best. It's going to be the loudest. We'll be able to pick you up. Or, hey, you need to put this little thing this close to your mouth. Whatever it may be. Yeah, it's a good point. And this goes both ways. Some people like to do podcasts with guests where they just kind of, you may have topics picked out, but you don't necessarily let the guests know what those things are, and you just go for it. And sometimes people will send like, hey, these are the things that I'm looking to talk about. And maybe there's a little back and forth, but before the podcast with the guest, like, hey, I want to talk about these things. Is that cool? And they'll be like, yeah, or I don't really want to talk about that, or I don't really have a whole lot of information on this, but I would also like to talk about this, that, or the other.
Yeah.
Right? So doing that back and forth where you're giving
That communication's big.
right.
And I know just being somebody that's been on a few different podcasts over the years, where a few of them have just been like, hey, you're going to be on the podcast at 3 p.m. Call up, and then they just ask a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
Whereas I've also been on some where I got a detailed, this is what I want to talk about. How does this fit into what your experiences are and kind of what your MO of being here is? You know,
Well, I
and
think
having that back end makes
yeah.
a lot better conversation.
Yeah, and I think too, especially like for a podcast, that if you've got a really specific kind of end goal in mind, or a specific angle you want to take on something, I could go as myself. I could go on a podcast, 5 different podcasts, and I mean my life experiences are always the same. They haven't changed, but what life experiences or what knowledge or what applications or things that I've gotten from those pieces of knowledge or life experiences that I choose to bring onto the podcast may be different for every one of them, because maybe somebody wants to talk more specifically about editing. Maybe somebody wants to talk more specifically about video. Maybe somebody wants to just talk about how did I get into the career field, or maybe somebody wants to talk more about just general random stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you've got a very specific editing podcast and you're having somebody come on, it would be helpful, like to me, if I'm that guest, for you to go, hey, I really want to talk about editing specifically, or editing waterfowl specifically, or editing hunting television specifically, or editing content for brands specifically, right? Because most people have all kinds of experiences, all kinds of knowledge, all kinds of different things that they could talk about. And so it's helpful, one, to know kind of which direction you may want to take that conversation and what angles you want to pursue, and to kind of give them a heads up, because it primes even if you don't really say, hey, I want to talk about like these things specifically, it helps prime their head to, hey, this is kind of where he wants to take this thing. And, I will tailor my responses to help get to that point as a guest. And also, it's a good skill to know how to talk and bring conversation about. You have to have the ability, one, to have a direction you want to go in and try to go in that direction. But some people talk more or less than others, and that's just, everybody knows that from talking to people. But like if you ask me a question, I'll talk about it for a very long time.
Yeah,
and you're probably not you might not have to like try to drag information out of me. You're probably going to have to be like, we're done with that, let's move on. Right? Whereas some people, you're like, hey, do you like editing? They'll be like, yeah,
that's cool. I like editing.
And then now you have to start dragging that information out of them.
Well, that's one that kind of brings up a good point. If you're somebody that wants to have a podcast and you have a lot of things to talk about, and a lot of interesting people that you can talk with, but maybe you're not the most comfortable speaker in the world. Not everybody's you and could just ramble on for 6 hours and never stop. But to have notes and just bullet points of just conversation points and flow, where you can just reference it and say, okay, yep, fishing, hunting, whatever, and just go down your list, and then to not have it like written out word for word where you're just reading,
right?
But to be able to have things where you can just kind of flow your conversation throughout your entire podcast and be able to just keep your listeners engaged in that and make it seem like you are a good speaker, even though it may be something that's a little uncomfortable for you.
And it's going to be probably uncomfortable for most people straight off the bat. I think it's the rare person that just gets on a podcast and is really comfortable in that medium. But it comes with
kind
time.
Of awkward for a lot of people. I mean, especially if you're on a podcast by yourself.
Oh yeah.
And you're just sitting there staring at a wall and talking. I mean, that's a little odd. It's a little different in this situation where we're just having a conversation about something that we're all passionate about. I mean, that makes things a lot easier. But that's also why you start a podcast based on something you are passionate about. And then people pick up on that and realize that this is something that you care about and you're actually a wealth of knowledge in that subject.
Yeah, I think conversation and interviewing is as much a skill as anything else.
Mm-hmm.
You can learn to be good at conversation. You can learn to be good at interviewing people. And you can learn how to get the information that you'd like to get out of somebody. That sounds like a very coercive thing. Coercive. That sounds like a very coercive thing to say, but I don't mean it in that connotation. Just means that if you know that you want to talk about certain things or you'd like to get to a certain place, there's ways that you can do that, and you'll develop the skills to do that.
Well, and that's with everything practice.
Mhm.
I mean, you could record 10 podcasts, and if you don't think they went well, but number 9 went well, just post number 9.
Yeah.
You don't have to post the bad ones. That just got you to that point where you're now comfortable in it. You're
Right.
comfortable talking about all of this, and you're not fumbling and doing a bunch of ahs and ums and pauses and staring into the distance awkwardly like Clay does. Yeah, see, like, we probably lost 7 listeners just in that 5 seconds.
I just wanted to see how long it would go because I'm a huge fan of suspense and drama, and that was a very suspenseful moment. I enjoyed that.
That wasn't very suspenseful to me.
I thought it was.
No,
I mean,
I
sitting here
enjoyed it.
looking at it, if you're in the room right now, it's a very suspenseful moment. If you're just listening, you probably
And that's
know
why
what
you watched
happened?
the live.
You know what happens to me sometimes? There's some podcasts that have like just a little bit of a pause, and their audio drops so quiet that like how when you're listening to music and somebody calls you, and there's that little bit of silence before your phone rings. If there's a little like that silence in a
I'll look
podcast,
at my phone.
my brain will be like, oh, somebody's calling me.
I'm not that popular.
Well, I mean, nobody really calls me, but I get random text messages and stuff. Like, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I
You
know
think your
exactly
phone
what you're
is
talking
taking
about,
over.
yeah.
I've had it happen to me so many times. And it's usually not in podcasts like this. It's usually in like a crime podcast where they have those dramatic pauses, but it's a long enough pause where you're like, did I lose service? Did my Bluetooth turn off? What's happening here? And then I'm like, oh, it's just a suspenseful pause. Good to go. So I think
That's a good point, though. Just listening to other podcasts
yeah.
and how like good podcasts do it, and kind of understanding that and modeling the way you do stuff.
Clay's
kind of-
being a terrible guest right now. He's spinning crap on the table, and I can hear it. Stop that, Clay. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Keegan, that Clay interrupted you like that.
Clay's distraction was too much distraction. No, but just finding like a podcast that you like or a style that you like, and then kind of creating your own style off of that.
Yeah.
Obviously not everything's about copying them, but if you can see what good podcasters do and how they do it, the Joe Rogans of the world or Bert Kreischer, or like people like that have really engaging podcasts that a lot of people listen to and just understand and analyze why they have a good podcast.
Anytime I've ever listened to Rogan, I skip like the first 14 minutes of the podcast because there's nothing but ads.
Yeah, you will find
that's like Meat Eater. They do like 2.5 minutes ads the first episode, and I just
Right.
skip through all of it.
Like if I'm ever not on a podcast that we do and I listen to it, as soon as it starts playing, I hit that 30-second skip. I skip the intro and just start listening to the podcast.
Every time. I even skip our intro.
Yeah, so do I. Skip it.
I don't listen to our podcast because I'm usually on it.
I've listened to every single episode,
That you've been on?
even the ones I've been on.
See, this is a human tendency that I've always been curious about, because I was here, I listened to it, and was on it, and so for me, I don't need to listen to it again because I was part of it.
I don't
What
either.
if you miss something?
Wouldn't have. I'm here.
I don't know. Your ADHD is pretty bad.
My ADHD is also great at just lots of streams of information coming into my head. I mean, taking them all in. But like I would get it if we were recording something and it was being edited or chopped up or changed or like artistically differentiated from its original form, right? Then I might listen to it to be like, okay, how did this end up as a final product? But because the final product is exactly what just happened to me, I don't listen to it. Why do you listen to it over again?
I think in some ways, it helps you be better at doing that.
Your voice soothes him.
That's all the answer I needed. I guess we can. That's good.
Yeah,
Perfect.
that's the end of the podcast. Game over. No, I think you can learn a
Caleb
lot
says
by-
you should listen to yourself, so you have to hear what we hear. I'm just gonna sound great. I'm gonna put it on my.
No, we
Here's
don't
what I'll
need to
do
do
is
that.
I'll put it on my freaking sound system at home,
Oh,
and it's
please.
just gonna sound
Okay.
phenomenal.
Speaking of that,
Yeah,
rabbit hole. Your podcast will have rabbit holes, by the way.
I mean, unless you're just like super notes driven, and
Keegan lives with Ryer. They share an humble abode together. Is his sound system that great?
I mean, in 1985, it was really great.
That's all I needed to hear.
It's still pretty good.
it's better than almost 80
It's better than
80
the,
to 90% of the sound systems or avenues that people are using to listen to their music now. Right?
My Beats by Dre Studio Wireless.
Better
not as good.
as
it's-
my setup?
No, his Beats by Dre is not as good as yours.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what I just said.
My setup, if you're not listening on full-size speakers at your house, my setup is better than yours.
That's an opinion.
No, it's not.
There's no way to mathematically test that.
There probably is, and it would win.
No.
Anyway,
Just, I don't know. We literally sat on the front porch listening to, who was it?
Blackfoot.
Blackfoot.
Never heard
With
of
a sound system that was inside of my house. And we both were like, oh, it's getting late. We should probably turn it down a little bit. And that was an entirely analog setup. No digital, nothing digital as in that. It was a record played on a record
I'm sure
player.
in 1985 it was top of the line.
Yeah, well, the problem is to get a top of the line
That's
system
not the
today
point.
is
It
way too
doesn't-
expensive
Anyway,
for me.
back to
You just don't
podcasts
appreciate
and off
things.
of vinyl.
Last thing I wanted to talk about. This is 118. It actually hasn't been as long as I thought it was. The last thing I want to talk about is if you want to add a video component and or live component to your show. That adds a whole other level of complexity. But it can be done. It can be engaging. I will give you kind of how we have it set up.
And if you're Ryer, start the process 13 minutes before you're supposed to air on the live stream so that it actually is on
13?
time.
How about 30?
Well, we were 13
You know what?
minutes
Next
late,
time?
that's why
Next time, we'll have you set it up from scratch.
I don't want to.
I know, but if you're going to give me crap about it.
I don't have a Mac with an M1, so I can't do it.
that's a good point.
True. Inferior.
Can't hide money.
You can.
Fact.
Obviously, if you're going to visually stream your podcast, you're going to need a camera. We use a Canon 6D. You can use any camera that has an HDMI out.
Or mini HDMI out.
Or mini HDMI out. People use GoPros. People use Handycams. There's probably a way to use your phone to do it if you wanted to. We use a 6D. It's really easy. Obviously, if you've got a mini HDMI out of your camera, you're probably going to need a converter from mini HD to full HD. Then we've got a HDMI. We've got a HDMI cord ran into this little video card. It's basically called a video card. And it's called a CamLink video card. And essentially what that does is convert the camera's signal to something that your computer can read.
This is the same technology since 2004 when Xbox gaming first became popular.
Did you need one of those for it?
Yeah.
See, I never had an Xbox, so I wouldn't know. But most people probably have. So that was a good addition. Thank you for that. I didn't know that that was a thing that you had to have. Interesting. So, yeah, just take that from your Xbox and use it, or buy it. I don't think they're very expensive. And then we have that ran obviously into the computer via a US. What are you laughing at? And care to share with the class?
Oh, wow.
No. If you're gonna make fun of me, at least do it to my face. You guys know my policy. I don't care what you have to say. Just say it to me. I want to be a part of the joke. Tell me the thing.
What's the rest of your backend setup there to stream on live?
No, I want to know what's causing him to die over there. I must know. Out with it, Clay.
Oh, you're doing great.
He's literally crying. I've never seen this much emotion out of Clay ever. This is the hardest I've ever seen Clay laugh. He's literally crying.
This is the third tear he's ever shed in his life.
And the first two are when he ran over that sprinkler in the outfield. What is it, Clay? Please tell me. I think the people would love to know what you're laughing at.
I have nothing to share.
Oh,
Your sincere thankfulness to Keegan's addition about the Xbox was the most sarcastic thing you've ever said.
I wasn't even being sarcastic.
Thank you for that addition there. It may be helpful.
No, I was. See, again, people misinterpret what I say all the time, apparently.
You're just funny.
I was legitimately thankful for that addition. I had not ever, I didn't know that was a thing. So I didn't either. I was actually thanking Keegan for adding that because that would be helpful. But I guess it came across as me being a sarcastic jerk. I wasn't even trying to be sarcastic at that point
How
in
low
time.
on the list was jerk in the words you were going to use before jerk?
There's probably 2 or 3 words ahead of that.
Sorry for my interruption. Continue.
Sorry, I was actually being genuine there. But we've got that ran into the computer. Again, we also have the same kind of thing with the board. The board has a USB out that we have plugged into the computer. And so we use a streaming software called OBS. It's free, super, super capable. There's lots of streaming softwares out there. A lot of people use OBS. Again, it's free, so why wouldn't you? Basically, you take the audio stream from the camera, and you take the video stream from the camera, and the audio stream from the board, put it into here. It combines them, and then you have it on the computer. What you then have to do is, if you're going to stream on YouTube, you have to set up the stream. It gives you a stream key. You got to put stuff like that in. You can get as complicated or as simple as you want. You could do a multi-camera setup in OBS if you wanted to. You guys see the beginning. We've got the open. We've got our little commercial. We've got a placeholder. All of those are assets that we've created, imported into OBS, and we just kind of play through them.
Can you create them in OBS, or is it just easier to import them?
I don't think you could. Well, you can't create. OBS is not an editing program.
So they don't have like templates?
They might. I wouldn't know.
I have never looked at OBS, so
yeah, I don't know if they have templates. I mean, it's more of a live switcher kind of thing than anything else.
It's like a digital switchboard.
Yeah, basically. If you are not running this board, I don't know necessarily the workflow to getting audio from like a Zoom H6, H4, H5, whatever, into a computer. I know how I used to do it. Instead of having a video card you have to have a sound card. So if you're running sound out of a mixing board and you want to convert it to a USB signal that your computer can utilize, then you have to have a sound card. And it basically takes an analog signal from an analog soundboard and spits it into the computer as a digital signal. If you've got a digital board of some kind, most of them probably have a USB out. If you're using, like I said, a Zoom, I don't know the workflow to that. You would have to do some Googling, or I would have to do some Googling to figure that out. If you're going to be live streaming, I would say you should probably just get one of these.
Yeah,
honestly.
definitely. Instead of Googling it, just call Ryer so he can Google it.
Sure. Now I'm honestly curious. Because I'm sure there's a way. I'm sure somebody is doing it, but I don't know how it's done. So that is one of my fatal flaws. Is
send your questions to rednecktechpodcast@gmail.com. Attention, Ryer Porter.
I genuinely like when other people call me with editing questions that I haven't seen before. I take it upon myself to try to figure out what the answer is, because I want to know that answer for if that happens to me, and it becomes almost a personal problem for me now. Like I feel like I want to solve that problem as if it was my own problem, because someday it might be, because that's the way
It's
that
just your fear of missing out.
It's like the
No,
Michael Jordan. It's like the Michael Jordan, and I took it personally.
and I took that personally. No, I'm genuinely like, if there's a problem that somebody else is having that I could foresee myself having, I want to know the solution. So even if I don't find out the solution, I want them to tell me what the solution was after the fact, so that if it happens to me, I know it.
We were doing the University of North Georgia baseball shoot, and Ryer sat in the dugout on phone and FaceTime with, was it RT Bailey?
It was Rob Kinney.
Rob Kinney, for no exaggeration of 2 hours, trying to figure something out, and neither of them could figure it out, including the help of YouTube and Adobe support, which is no support whatsoever.
And we got Caleb involved at some point.
Yes. And, yeah. Go to Ryer with all your questions.
Again, rednecktechpodcast@gmail.com. Attention, Ryer Porter.
Ryer at Copeland-creative.com.
Also that.
Yeah, that's
Attention,
my business
help me.
email. That is, yeah. Attention, help me. All caps. Immediately, I am dying.
Oh, that.
If it's a medical emergency, call 911. There. Now we can't be sued for that. Caleb says, I've dozed off twice. I may need to get involved here. Look, just trying to get you some much needed rest.
He could
El
call
Presidente.
in. We could.
Suddenly, that function is not working. It's broken. Can't call in. It
Sorry.
doesn't work.
Sorry. Sorry, my phone's dead.
Yep. I'm going.
I'm gonna text.
Drop the call.
I gotta text Caleb and tell him not to call in because my phone's dead.
Don't call. Phone's dead.
This is an automated response.
The other thing is, obviously we have tried to stream this to Instagram and to TikTok. There's levels of complexity there that we still have not figured out.
It's ugly.
There's a lot of audio adapters in this studio right now, and none of them do the job that I want them to do. There's ways to do it. It's a lot. So,
But if you figure it out, email Ryer at Copeland-creative.com. Attention, I can help you.
if you ever have a social question on social media, you should email Keegan at Copeland-creative.com. And that includes, how do I post? Where is the like button? And Keegan will happily field those questions. So if we're going to be doxing people, get doxed, mother fricker.
What are they going to email Clay? How to comb your mustache?
Well, I got hella solutions.
You've got one solution.
And it's hella.
It's
I'm even going to use it while I say it.
I just can't believe that.
My solution is hella, bro.
For beauty tips, contact Clay
Except hair loss. I
Copeland-creative.com.
haven't figured the hair loss one out yet. But anything else, I got you.
Yeah, he can tell you all the solutions that don't work.
Facts. All of them don't work.
Caleb says $900 later. $900 of what?
Don't look at me. I didn't ask him.
$900 of what? Probably my audio connections. I'm just. Are y'all drunk? Only off life. Cheers.
I'm drunk off of awesome work environment.
Clay says, please don't stop the direct deposit. Yeah, so.
Yeah, if you want to have a podcast, don't do this.
Or do. I think people kind of like it a little bit.
One or the other.
Yeah, live streaming your podcast it's not super, cords, adapters. It's not super complicated. It requires a few extra pieces of hardware and software. The one thing that I will say, because this has happened to me, this has happened to other people, you cannot simply sync the audio from a board and captured audio from a camera together. There's it's kind of a technically complicated problem. But essentially, inside of any recording device, there's a clock that keeps time, and that inside every recording device, there's a clock. If you don't sync up those recording devices, each clock inherently has a certain amount of error. You won't notice that error in, like, a really small clip. But if you start recording for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour and a half, that error begins to compound. And so what you'll find is you'll spit out your audio file from your audio recorder, and you'll spit out your audio file from your camera, and you'll go to sync them up in Premiere like you would anything else. And at the end, you'll be multiple frames out of sync. And logically, that shouldn't happen, right? Because if you sync them up, everything should stay in sync. Well, that error has compounded, and because the error is different between your audio device and your video device, they get out of sync. So there are solutions to it. There are workarounds, but I would say if you're trying to record your podcast, the best thing to do is to figure out a way to route your audio directly from your recorder into your camera, or take them both into like a OBS or something like that and combine them and save that file or record that file. That's just my piece of advice, because I've tried to do it multiple times. I've had to help some guys try to figure out what was going on when they did that, and that's kind of the only way I've really been able to see how to do that effectively. Or you have to time code lock all of your devices, and that's
atrocious.
Yeah, that's a whole thing. So that's my piece of advice if you're trying to record a visual component to your podcast. Other than that, I mean, I think we've covered everything and more. If we didn't cover what it takes to have a podcast on this, we've done a terrible job for an hour and a half. Do you think that we've covered all the information somebody would need to have to at least get started or to know what they're in for, Keegan?
I think they've more than gotten started.
Clay?
Sí.
Muchas gracias.
Muy bien.
And with that, I don't think there are any announcements that I can think of.
Is the class full?
I think the class is full.
Class is full.
But if you're still interested in coming to the class, feel free and reach out on the Instagram in case somebody cancels last minute. Not that it's going to happen, but also then we can know that you're in for the next class.
Mm-hmm.
Facts.
Redneck Tech Podcast on Instagram, Redneck Tech Podcast on YouTube. Redneck Tech Podcast in everywhere. It's just that's what it is. It's
all
always
main,
red.
all major
Words,
streaming
words.
platforms.
All major streaming platforms. We be pushing that RSS feed. We be pushing it. So, anyways, that's it. Thanks for listening. I know it's been a long one. Hopefully it was informative. Next week, we're going to be talking pretty much the same way about what it takes to have a web show. So if that's something that you are also interested in, make sure to tune in.
And tell your friends.
And smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, smash that comment section, and
Turn on your notifications.
yeah.
Bingo.
And make sure you get a mascara brush for your mustache, because that's what you need to do. Anyways, out.